On the evening of February 15, 2015, in the quiet suburb of Rochester, Minnesota, the winter air was cold and still. As the clock approached midnight, most of the neighborhood was settling into the calm of the night, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Lauren Harrison, a dedicated nurse at the local hospital, returned home after a demanding 12-hour shift. The hospital had been unusually busy that day, and Lauren was exhausted. As she parked her car in the driveway of their modest home at 237 Oak Street, she noticed the house was shrouded in darkness, which was unusual for a Sunday night when they usually shared their evening together. Upon entering the house, Lauren immediately sensed something was off. The silence was unsettling, and she called out for her husband Larry, expecting to hear his familiar voice or find him watching television in the living room. But there was no response. A sense of dread washed over her as she moved through the dimly lit home. When she reached the kitchen, the sight that greeted her sent shockwaves through her. Larry, a 42-year-old bank manager known for his kindness and strong work ethic, lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The gleam of the kitchen knife, stained and discarded nearby, made her stomach churn. Lauren dropped to her knees beside him, desperately shaking him in hopes he would wake up. But it was clear that he was lifeless, and panic set in as she fumbled for her phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice seemed distant as Lauren sobbed, trying to explain the horror she had found. Emergency services arrived within minutes, the sound of sirens piercing the stillness of the night as neighbors began to peek out of their windows, alarmed by the commotion. Paramedics rushed in but quickly confirmed what Lauren feared. Larry was dead. As the police cordoned off the scene, Detective John Martinez and Detective Sarah Chan were assigned to the case. The stark reality of the crime scene began to unfold before them, and they immediately noticed the absence of forced entry. This indicated that Larry likely knew his attacker, a chilling notion that suggested betrayal from someone close. Detective Martinez began interviewing Lauren, who was still in shock. She recounted her evening, her voice shaky but filled with confusion. The couple had been planning a quiet evening together, and Lauren recalled their last conversation over the phone while she was at work. Everything had seemed normal. As forensic teams arrived, they meticulously began documenting the scene, taking photographs and collecting evidence. The knife, a kitchen utility knife, became a focal point in the investigation. Detectives noted the lack of defensive wounds on Larry's body, leading them to theorize that he hadn't fought back against his assailant. Detective Chan took charge of interviewing the neighbors, hoping to gather any additional insights. Most reported hearing nothing unusual that night, but one neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, mentioned seeing a dark sedan parked in front of the Harrisons' home around 9 p.m. She described the car as out of place, noting it left just before the sound of sirens filled the air. As the hours passed, the detectives were aware that time was of the essence. They needed to establish a timeline and identify potential suspects quickly, especially given the nature of the crime and the trauma inflicted on Lauren. As the investigation progressed, Detective John Martinez and Detective Sarah Chan delved deeper into the relationships surrounding Larry and Lauren Harrison. Their initial inquiries hinted at a potential motive for the murder that stretched beyond the immediate grief of losing a loved one. The detectives learned that Larry had recently been promoted at work, a development that brought both excitement and stress to his life. This promotion not only came with a raise, but also increased responsibilities, including the possibility of relocation to a larger branch in Minneapolis. This change would uproot the couple's comfortable life in Rochester and create additional strain on their relationship. Friends noted that Larry had expressed anxiety about the prospect of leaving their home, especially given their struggles with starting a family. Detective Chun discovered that in the weeks leading up to Larry's death, he had made significant changes to his will. Previously, he had included his mother-in-law, Margaret Smith, as a beneficiary, but he had recently altered it to leave everything to Lauren. This decision sparked a chain of conversations among close friends, with many suggesting that Larry's change of heart regarding his finances might have upset Margaret, who was known to have strong opinions about money and family security. The detectives surmised that a financial motive could intertwine with Margaret's emotional state, suggesting a deeper underlying resentment that had festered over time. During a casual conversation with Lauren's friend Emily Parker, it became clear that there had been tension between Lauren and her mother regarding their future plans. Lauren felt that Margaret's interference was becoming increasingly intrusive, particularly regarding her personal choices in her marriage. Emily recounted how Lauren had confided in her about feeling trapped between her mother's expectations and her life with Larry. The detectives started to piece together a narrative. Margaret's emotional instability, her controlling behavior, and her disappointment about her daughter's life choices could all have contributed to a potential motive for murder. They realized that Larry's will was a catalyst for Margaret's feelings of betrayal, and these combined factors created a toxic environment ripe for violence. The Harrison family, once a picture of suburban normalcy, had become embroiled in a web of conflict and dysfunction that ultimately contributed to Larry's tragic death. At the heart of this dynamic was Margaret, Larry's wife, who had devoted her life to her family, but struggled with feelings of inadequacy and jealousy, particularly toward her daughter Lauren. As a child, Margaret had faced a turbulent upbringing marked by neglect and emotional turmoil. Her parents' volatile relationship left her with a profound fear of abandonment, which shaped her views on family and loyalty. After marrying Larry, she found solace in the stability he provided, but this security was threatened when Lauren began to assert her independence, especially after marrying Larry. Margaret's relationship with Lauren began to shift after the wedding. What was once a close mother-daughter bond gradually morphed into competition. Margaret felt as though her daughter was not only taking Larry away from her but was also threatening her identity as a mother. She began to harbor resentment, perceiving Larry as the catalyst for Lauren's independence. As a result, she became increasingly controlling and critical, often making disparaging comments about Lauren's choices and attempts to assert her own identity. For her part, Lauren struggled to understand her mother's behavior. She often felt caught in the middle between her love for Larry and her desire to support her mother. This tension reached a breaking point when Larry began to express concerns about Margaret's mental health, urging Lauren to confront her mother about her increasingly erratic behavior. Lauren found herself torn between her loyalty to her husband and her desire to protect her mother. In the months leading up to Larry's death, the family dynamics became even more strained. After Larry's unexpected decision to revise his will, favoring Lauren over Margaret, Margaret felt threatened and betrayed. She perceived this change as a rejection of her role in the family, igniting a sense of desperation and panic. The emotional landscape was fraught with miscommunication, anger, and unmet needs, culminating in a tragic explosion of violence that no one could have anticipated. This complex interplay of emotions revealed the depth of the family's issues. What should have been a nurturing environment instead became a battleground of jealousy, fear, and unacknowledged pain. The failure to communicate and address these underlying issues ultimately set the stage for the horrific events that would unfold, highlighting how deep-seated emotional struggles can lead to devastating consequences within families. As detectives John Martinez and Sarah Chan delved deeper into the investigation, they uncovered a series of unsettling truths that painted a grim picture of the circumstances surrounding Larry Harrison's murder. Armed with mounting evidence, they secured a search warrant for Margaret's home, determined to find the pieces that would complete their puzzle. The search commenced in the early hours of the morning, with forensic teams meticulously combing through every corner of the house. They focused on the areas where Margaret spent most of her time, hoping to find something, anything, that could link her to the crime. Hours passed as detectives sifted through papers, personal belongings, and household items, feeling the weight of the case bearing down on them. Their persistence paid off when, in the garage, they discovered a pair of gardening gloves hidden beneath an old tool cabinet. The gloves were immediately sent to the forensic lab for analysis. When the results returned, they confirmed the detectives' worst fears. The gloves contained traces of Larry's blood, establishing a direct connection between Margaret and the murder scene. In addition to the gloves, investigators also uncovered a hidden compartment in a dresser that contained several of Margaret's journals. The detectives quickly realized that these diaries could provide crucial insights into her state of mind leading up to the murder. The entries revealed a woman grappling with intense feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, and rage. One particularly chilling entry described a growing sense of paranoia about losing Lauren to Larry. Margaret's words reflected an obsession with the idea that Larry was not only undermining her relationship with her daughter but also conspiring against her. Her writings indicated that she felt trapped in a life where she was no longer valued, culminating in a narrative that painted Larry as an enemy rather than a beloved husband. The more they read, the more the detectives understood that this was not just a murder. It was a culmination of a long-standing psychological battle within the family. The findings provided a deeper context to the crime, illustrating how Margaret's emotional state had deteriorated over time and suggesting a motive fueled by despair and jealousy. This shocking discovery of the blood-stained gloves and the revealing journals fundamentally shifted the investigation. It transformed Margaret from a grieving wife to a prime suspect, compelling the detectives to confront her with the evidence and begin the process of unraveling the truth behind the tragic events. With the incriminating evidence in hand, Detectives Martinez and Chan arranged for a formal interrogation of Margaret Smith. They recognized that this was a critical moment in their investigation. They needed her to confront the reality of her actions and the evidence against her. When Margaret arrived at the police station, she was visibly shaken, her body language betraying her anxiety. As the detectives led her into the interrogation room, she sat with her head down, fidgeting with her hands. Detective Chan began the questioning by presenting the evidence, the blood-stained gloves and the journals, asking Margaret to explain her side of the story. Initially, Margaret maintained her innocence, insisting that she had nothing to do with Larry's death. But as the detectives presented their timeline of events, linking her whereabouts to the night of the murder, the tension in the room intensified. Detective Martinez employed a calm yet firm approach, carefully laying out the evidence and asking pointed questions that forced Margaret to confront the reality of her situation. Slowly, cracks began to form in her defenses. Detective Chan, recognizing the emotional turmoil boiling beneath the surface, guided the conversation toward her feelings about Larry and Lauren. As they discussed the strained family dynamics, Margaret's composure shattered. Tears began to flow as she recalled the arguments she had with Larry over his decision to alter the will and her fears of losing her daughter. In a moment of raw honesty, Margaret confessed to the detectives that during an argument with Larry she had lost control. The emotional burden she had been carrying for years overwhelmed her, and in a moment of desperation, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed, her voice filled with anguish. "I just wanted him to understand how much he was hurting me. It all happened so fast." Her confession, a mixture of remorse and disbelief, revealed the complexities of her mental state. While she admitted to the crime, she expressed a profound sense of confusion and regret, as if she were still grappling with the reality of what she had done. The detectives listened intently, recognizing that beneath her confession lay a woman deeply scarred by years of emotional turmoil. As Margaret recounted the events of that night, the detectives understood that this was not simply a case of murder, but a tragic culmination of mental health struggles, unresolved grief, and familial strife. Her admission would become pivotal, not only for the prosecution's case, but also for understanding the tragic chain of events that had led to Larry's death. Following Margaret's confession, the detectives turned their focus to uncovering her past in greater detail, seeking to contextualize the emotional and psychological factors that had led her to such a tragic act of violence. They initiated a comprehensive investigation into Margaret's life, examining her relationships, mental health history, and personal struggles. Investigators reviewed Margaret's medical records, which revealed a history of untreated depression and anxiety. After the death of her first husband, she had experienced significant emotional distress, leading to sporadic therapy sessions and prescriptions for antidepressants. However, she often neglected her treatment, believing she could manage her emotions independently. Friends described her as someone who had always been strong. Yet beneath that facade lay a woman battling profound loneliness and insecurity. Interviews with family, friends, and acquaintances painted a troubling picture of Margaret's increasing isolation. Those close to her noted a marked change in her behavior after Larry's death. She became more withdrawn, consumed by jealousy and fear over Lauren's burgeoning independence and marriage. Many recounted instances where Margaret would make passive-aggressive comments about her daughter's choices, illustrating her growing resentment and feeling of abandonment. Detective Chan also dug into the family's history, exploring the dynamics that shaped Margaret's relationships with both Larry and Lauren. It became evident that Margaret's feelings of inadequacy were rooted in her childhood, marked by a volatile family environment that had left her yearning for stability. This longing manifested in her relationship with Larry, where she initially found solace but later felt threatened as he encouraged Lauren to pursue her dreams. The detectives also reviewed Margaret's journals, which had become central to understanding her mindset. Through her writings, they discovered her grappling with feelings of betrayal and isolation, as well as a desperate longing for validation from her family. The journals illustrated a descent into paranoia, as Margaret increasingly viewed Larry as a rival for her daughter's affection. The investigation uncovered not only the psychological factors that contributed to the tragedy, but also the systemic issues surrounding mental health treatment in their community. The lack of support and understanding often leaves individuals like Margaret to suffer in silence, culminating in heartbreaking outcomes. By piecing together Margaret's history, the detectives hoped to provide the court with a comprehensive understanding of the factors that had driven her to commit murder. This narrative was essential for framing the case not merely as one of criminality, but as a profound tragedy rooted in emotional despair and familial dysfunction. The aftermath of Larry Harrison's murder sent shockwaves through the community, leaving everyone grappling with the reality of the tragedy. The trial garnered significant media attention, shining a spotlight on the complexities of family dynamics and the often ignored issues of mental health. Lauren, now faced with the dual burden of mourning her husband and confronting her mother's actions, struggled to process her grief. The public nature of the trial forced her to relive the trauma of losing Larry and grapple with the betrayal she felt from her mother. Friends and family members offered support, but the emotional weight of the situation left her feeling isolated and conflicted. During the trial, Lauren chose to speak out, sharing her experiences and the impact of her mother's actions on her life. She described her relationship with Larry, emphasizing the love and support he had provided, and expressed her heartbreak at the loss of her future with him. In a powerful moment on the stand, she confronted Margaret, expressing her feelings of confusion and anger. "You were my mom, and I trusted you. How could you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Margaret's conviction for first-degree murder resulted in a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. While some in the community felt justice had been served, others mourned the loss of the woman they once knew, seeing her as a victim of her mental health struggles. The case sparked discussions about mental health resources and the importance of seeking help, highlighting the tragic consequences that can arise when these issues are left unaddressed. In the wake of the trial, Lauren became an advocate for mental health awareness. Using her platform to speak at community events, she shared her story to encourage open conversations about emotional struggles and the importance of seeking help. She often spoke about the need for support systems for families grappling with mental health issues, emphasizing that early intervention can prevent tragedies like her own. Lauren also sought therapy to navigate her grief and anger, working through the complex emotions stemming from her mother's actions. As time passed, she gradually found ways to honor Larry's memory, celebrating their love while learning to forgive her mother. With the help of friends, support groups, and therapy, Lauren began to rebuild her life, focusing on healing and personal growth. The case left an indelible mark on the community, prompting discussions about the complexities of family relationships and the importance of mental health awareness. It underscored the need for compassion and understanding in the face of emotional turmoil, reminding everyone that beneath the surface, many families struggle with their demons. Ultimately, the story of the Harrisons became a cautionary tale about the fragility of familial bonds and the devastating consequences of unresolved emotional struggles. In her advocacy work, Lauren aimed to transform her pain into a source of strength, ensuring that others would not have to endure the same heartache that her family had faced. Through resilience and determination, she sought to create a future filled with hope, healing, and understanding. In the aftermath of the tragic Harrison family case, it's important to reflect on the deeper implications of this heartbreaking story. As we've explored, the layers of family dynamics, mental health struggles, and the desperate need for communication are crucial in understanding how such a tragedy could unfold. The case serves as a reminder of the fragility of our relationships and the consequences of unresolved emotional turmoil. If you found this story impactful, we encourage you to engage with us by liking this video. Your support helps spread awareness about the importance of mental health and open dialogue within families. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments section below. What do you think could have been done differently to prevent such a tragedy? Let's open a conversation about the complexities of family relationships and the significance of seeking help. Remember to subscribe for more compelling true crime stories as we continue to delve into the intricacies of human behavior and the darker side of our society. Thank you for watching and being part of this important discussion.